any further ado, we're going to bring in the man himself. I remember watching this man back in the day at the NWA. He's a part of the original Skyscrapers. Me and my mother Tech. This man is a former WWE Superstar, former WCW star, former Japan star, all over. We're going to bring him right now, the man himself, Dangerous Dan Spivey. Welcome to Under the Mat Radio.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for the warm welcome.
Hey, what's going on, baby?
How you feeling today?
I'm good, man. What part of the country are you guys in?
Baltimore.
Baltimore, okay. I'm here in the sunshine state of Florida.
Oh. How's the weather down there?
It's hot during the day and rainy in the evening time, but, and humid.
Yeah. Dan, we thank you much for coming on. First of all, what do you want us to call you as? You want us to call you Mr. Dan, Dangerous Dan, Waylon Mercy?
Whatever you guys feel comfortable with, I'm comfortable with it.
All right, I'm going to call him DD then.
Yeah.
I'm call you DD. What's going on, DD? Yeah, that's what I'm going to call you.
It's all good. It's all good.
That's what, yeah. And I see Gameboy feels better like that.
It is. We can call you DD.
Yeah, DD.
DD, if you don't mind, before we start the interview, do you have any memories of any of your matches working here in Baltimore?
In Baltimore?
Yes.
Gosh, no, I remember always getting lost in Baltimore. Traffic there is terrible.
Still is.
Me and Rotundo, we fly in the Baltimore Washington area and driving around. We got lost so many times. It was brutal. That was way before they had GPS and stuff. Man, I don't know. Baltimore is just a tough town to find your way around.
Yeah.
Is that just me, or y'all heard that before?
Actually, we hear from people that live here as well, but we've heard worse stories of living in D.C. So it could be worse. Could live in D.C. in that big old circle.
Yeah.
So get around from there. What I'm gonna do, Dan, is I'm sorry, Dee, you're gonna bring in our correspondent Shin-Blade. Go ahead, Shin, you live with Dan Spivey. You can start us off.
Actually, nice to meet you, Dan. We talked a couple weeks ago. Shout out to your wife also during the Bischoff interview. Actually, I wanted you to plug in your program that you have, because I remember seeing you on the episode of Total Divas about a year or two ago with Jim Neidhart, and you have this program of rehabilitation.
Yeah, I work with alcoholics and drug addicts. Since I am a recovering drug addict and alcoholic myself, I started a sober companion deal where I work with alcoholics and drug addicts, usually after they get out of rehab. And I show them how to put the tools they learned in rehab into everyday life. I got that idea. How I came about that idea was I went to Vince. The WWE sent me to rehab, I think, 4 times. And the 3 previous times I went to rehab, I got out. And when it came time to put the tools to use that I learned in rehab, I just say, I couldn't do it, or I couldn't find a meeting to go to, or nobody would talk to me, and I just say, screw it, So the last time I went through, I came up with the idea, wouldn't it be a good idea that, when one of the boys got out of rehab and they go home, for me to go home with them and show them how to, put the tools that we learned into everyday use and stuff. And, they couldn't, I used to tell people, well, if you walked in my shoes, you don't know because you haven't done the things I've done. Well, the guys, they couldn't tell me that because I've done that and probably more than them, so they can't use that excuse with me, and I've done that with quite a few of the guys, and we've had great success. In Jim Neidhart's case, which everybody saw on TV, I'm not breaking any anonymity on that, was an intervention, and what I did with him, it was tough. It was a tough case, and I stayed in rehab 3 days with him to make sure he wouldn't leave, he wouldn't hurt anybody. Spent the night with him over there in a rehab facility called HCC, Healthcare Connection. So, you know, I do interventions. I do travel companion. A big thing for people to relapse and have problems is going through airports. And a lot of times I travel on business trips, you know, going to weddings or business meetings, and just try and keep them sober.
All right. Thanks for that. Tell us about the support, the great support system that WWE has been through your journey and your tough times of recovering from your addiction.
They've been great. You know, I don't know how many. The WWE is probably the only corporation in the world that takes care of guys. I hadn't worked for them in over 15, 16, 17 years, something like that. And, you know, no questions asked. They sent me to rehab 4 times. You know, I don't know another corporation, anybody that would do that. It doesn't matter, you know, if you had one match, what I understand, anybody who's ever signed a contract with them, you know, they throw them, you know, put them right through and take care of you. They saved me. I tell you what the program did. If it wouldn't have been for the program, I wouldn't be talking to you guys tonight. They saved my life. You know, I'll go that far and just say it right up front, you know, and be honest with you. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the program that WWE has.
Oh. Thank you for that. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, now, I'm sorry, I was just flabbergasted about just thinking about it because I'm one of those people that actually study addiction on the side because I have family members and friends who are going through alcohol and drug abuse, and I have former girlfriends that were alcoholics themselves, and I was just one of those guys where it's like I've been through so much with them, you know, lost money, lost things, and then it got to the point where I got fed up and I left, to the point where, like, if I recently know that somebody's under something, I just walk out. Now, how would you deal with a situation like that?
Gosh, each situation is unique in their own. You know, it's hard to say. Everybody is different. You know, it depends on the circumstances and stuff. I know a lot of people, you know, family members and friends really get sucked in. You know, it's because you want to help them. You want to see them get help, and so you loan them money and you try and, you know, help them get through all this. But the worst thing you can do is enable them. You know, they have to hit rock bottom. They can't get sober. I couldn't get sober just because my mom and dad wanted me to, or a friend wanted me to. I had to hit rock bottom. I had to, you know, just bottom out, and that's what happened to me. I almost died, and I had to make a decision, you know, not to do it my way anymore, but to listen to somebody. And I had to get sober because Dan Spivey wanted to get sober, and that's what the big turning thing for me is. You know, everybody tries to get sober just because someone asked them to. It's not going to work.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Go ahead, Sean.
Excuse me?
Yeah, go. You can continue.
Okay. Now, this is the part that I wanted to get into. You know, I had somebody send me some papers about this impending lawsuit that WWE's been hit by former WWE stars like Billy Jack Haynes and probably others that have stepped up that haven't really come to the forefront. Now, I have read some of the posts that's been going back between Billy Jack Haynes and yourself over social media, and can you tell the fans of your perception of this whole thing and how it started? Meanwhile, I can pull up some quotes while you let the fans know.
Sure. You know, I'd seen on Facebook, you know, where Billy and some of the other guys, you know, were having this class action suit against Vince and the WWE, WWF. And I had read about it, but I didn't really pay any attention to it. I understand that they got lawyers that represented the NFL with their concussion cases and the big multi-million-dollar lawsuit that the NFL had against the players had against the NFL. And so they got the same lawyers, and so they are going after the WWE and WWF, on a concussion, no union, unsafe work conditions. We were forced to work hurt and got fired for no reason, a bunch of stuff. So I just was a spectator on all that. And I got a message from Billy Jack. Billy Jack, sent me a message on Facebook saying that I qualified to be under this class action lawsuit that they had and stuff. And he went through all the reasons why he thought that, they had a good suit and all this. So I read it, and 2 weeks went by, and I didn't respond. And then finally I did respond in a private message to Billy. I sent the message, and I told Billy that I just didn't feel the way he did, and I didn't have any issues, with Vince or the WWE, and I just wasn't going to follow in on the lawsuit with him. And so Billy went on the public part of Facebook, and he went out and he just, said that I was a Vince McMahon suck ass and that I was on the payroll and I was just a stooge and, how could I do this to the boys? And he just really railroaded, just he let me have it. And so I went and took the private message that I sent him, and I put it out in the public Facebook, and I stated, why I didn't believe things the way he did. And I said, this didn't happen to me. I wasn't forced to work, I wasn't forced to take steroids. I wasn't forced to take pain pills. I knew what I was getting into when I got into professional wrestling. It was an honor to work for the WWF back then. It was the number one company. They were going worldwide. You made a lot of money working for Vince. So, I wanted to work every day, and if I was hurt, that was the deal. If you didn't work, you didn't get paid. You knew that going in. No one ever forced me to take steroids. No one ever forced me to take pain pills. And that never happened to me. So I don't know what they got to bitch about. They knew what they were getting into before they ever started. I knew we had no hospitalization, no retirement plan. I knew the deal. I wanted to be a professional wrestler. I love the sport. I love entertaining people. I love being in front of the crowd. I got a big ego. I love money. So that was my deal.
Yes, that's true. Dan, reading the paperwork that shout out to Mrs. Spivey, your wife, that the paperwork she sent all of us to read. For some reason, in my opinion, I feel like this Billy Jack is just bitter and upset, and he was misquoting dates. Yeah. So you mentioned Bret Hart, that incident that happened in 1999, not 2001. He's throwing Scott Hall's name and stuff, throwing Dynamite Kid name, and I'm just wondering, like, why I'm not sure why he's like this. And I commend you, Dan, for being forward and being honest and not only talking about your issues and struggles, but the fact that you work with some of the other boys and that you can back up and speak for the boys too and be a voice for them and let them know that they want nothing to do with this lawsuit or this action at all.
Yeah, I've spoken with Dynamite's brother through Facebook and everything. He says Dynamite had no idea any of this was going on. I spoke to Lex Luger, who he said was in. Lex has no idea anything about it, nor does he want any part of it. These are the names they're throwing out there. I don't think Scott Hall has anything to do with it. I haven't talked to him, but I would think that he has nothing to do with it. So he's throwing out a lot of big names and stuff that the guys, have no idea, nor do they want to be a part of. So Billy he's just a guy who probably down on his luck and needs some dollars and didn't save his money or invest wisely, and so he's broke, and now he wants a free ticket. That's what it said. He didn't even work for Vince for about a year and a half. He had like a 14-year career, and he spent a year and a half with Vince, and all of his problems are because of Vince. Vince is such a big, bad, tough guy that he forced Billy to do things that he didn't want to do. I don't buy that. No, I work for Vince. Well, I hadn't been in the business, but maybe a year and a half, 2 years. I got a big break. I got Barry Windham quit. he was up there teaming with Mike Rotundo, and so I had similarities to Barry, and so they brought me in. Big break. I had been in the business for about a year and a half. Well, during this time that I'm there, I have a ruptured disc in my neck, the 6th and 7th, between the 6th and 7th vertebrae. I had to have an operation. I was losing, feeling in my left arm, and I was losing definition in it, and atrophy set in. So, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to come back. So I had the operation. Vince sends me $500 a week for about 6 months until I got well enough to come back and work. I don't know any other promoter that would do that. I don't know if he's ever done that for anybody else, but I'm just an opening match guy or mid-card guy, and he's helping me. I mean, that's awesome, and so that's what happened to me. So I can only write about, what happened to me and what happened to the guys that I used to run with, so I don't know. Billy says that he's in recovery. He's been recovering for 9 months, and I just don't believe it, in my professional opinion, that a guy like that, if he's in recovery, he don't talk the way that Billy talks, and, he just, I believe the guy's still using myself.
Yeah. I definitely, and it's sad, too, also, I'm going to say this before I turn it over to NSC Gameboy. It said that because of Billy Jack's antics and crazy thoughts that you said he forced WWE to countersue against him, which actually ended up messing up things for Dynamite Kid's insurance in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, since Billy's lawyers said that, Dynamite was in on this lawsuit, and so the WWE, they did a countersuit, and so they countersued Dynamite. But Dynamite doesn't have anything to do with it, and all they're doing is causing problems for the kid over there with his disabilities and stuff, through the government over there in Europe. And I just, it just caused problems for a lot of people who don't need the problems.
Yeah. It's sad. Once NSC Gameboy is done asking his question, we have a couple more callers that wanted to ask you some questions. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. NSC Gameboy, you can go ahead.
DD, I'm going to go a little personal with you, so bear with me on this one. I once hit rock bottom myself at a time in my life, and I remember it like it was yesterday. My question to you is, what mind state and where were you when you finally hit rock bottom, when you finally knew you needed help and you wanted help? What was the mind state that you were in? And
I was at my home in Tampa. I was at home, and I had been taking Xanax for a long time, a lot of Xanax, and I was taking a lot of opiates and a lot of alcohol. And I ran out of pills, I ran out of alcohol, and I had like 3 days before my next doctor visit. So I was at home, and I was detoxing, not because I wanted to, because I was just out of stuff, and all the people I dealt with didn't want to deal with me anymore, and I was just in a bad way. So I figured I could just make it, for 3 days. So like the second day, I was walking back from my bathroom to the bedroom. I just lost all feeling in my legs. I couldn't walk. I just fell over. And from my waist down was just no feeling. I was able to crawl to a table and pull a phone off, and I called 911. Well, they came and took me to the hospital, and while I was in the hospital, they were asking me questions and stuff. But the paramedics were at my house couldn't find any bottles. They didn't find any liquor bottles. They didn't find any pill bottles because I'd thrown all that stuff out, and just didn't find anything. And I told them, that I was, I told them what pills I was taking. But for some reason, I didn't tell them about the alcohol, and I didn't tell them about the Xanax, the benzodiazepines. And so they gave me a script of Oxycontin, and they sent me back home. And so I go back home. I don't know how long passed or whatever. My brother says it was like another 2 days. when I went to the hospital, my brother had brought me home, bought me some food, put me to bed. Well, he comes back a day and a half later, I was still in the bed. The food he bought me was still on the table. He asked me, what am I still doing in bed? And I said, I got a hole in my head. So he pulls back the covers, and my 45 was in bed, cocked, locked, ready to go. So I just was out of my head, and my brother calls 911. They take me back to the hospital. Well, while I'm in the hospital, they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. I mean, they took blood tests and stuff, but enough time had gone by, I guess, that they couldn't, when they did toxicology test on me in a report, they couldn't find anything going on. And so I was having these hallucinations and dreams and just going into convulsions. I was just a mess. I escaped from ICU. I escaped and made it out in the parking lot. I was running around naked, a 6'6" guy, 300 pounds, walking around the parking lot naked looking for cigarettes. And I freaked out a lot of people, and they put me back inside, and then I escaped again. And this time they strapped me into the bed. And during this time, ex-girlfriend of mine had come to the hospital, and she told them everything I was taking, told them about the Xanax, the benzodiazepine, and the alcohol and all that. So they gave me the medication that I needed. But during this time, I was in the hospital and going through all this. I had some of the worst nightmares and dreams that I could have swore they were real. They were so horrible that I can't even repeat it because it's just so weird and so strange. But I have those memories, and I just, it was just horrible. So I was so far out of it and acting so crazy, they thought I had done some brain damage. And so the WWE had heard about everything that was going on through my brother. I talked to Jerry Briscoe as a friend of the family's, and they sent me to a mental institution out in Houston, Texas, called the Manager Clinic. And while I was there at the Manager Clinic, under observation and everything, they did every test in the world. Luckily, there was no problem with my brain. I'd been there about 2 weeks. Something came over me that I had to do something different. What I was doing wasn't working, and I decided to become willing to take some advice and listen to some people. And since that day, I haven't had the urge to drink or drug. And, I figured if I got sober and all the stuff I had been through, because I had been an addict in one way or another for over 40 years, that if I got sober, I could probably help other people by just telling them the stories and the things that I went through, and hopefully they wouldn't repeat what I did. And I could turn all the wrong that I had done, all the people I had hurt, maybe I could turn all that around by staying sober. And so far it's worked. I'm going on 6.5 years. And it's just been an amazing ride. And, I just, instead of hoping to die every day, I look forward to every day of being able to possibly help some other individual who's suffering through this horrible disease.
Well, Dan, I'm just going to say, first of all, I want to say how proud we are of you, because
Thanks,
a lot of
man,
people,
I appreciate that.
A lot of people that we interview, we had a few guys on here who've had similar experiences with you, and most of them have found their way, and there's others, we're not going to say no names, but there's still others that's fighting their battle. And usually as men, we don't like to reveal that side of us because we don't want to seem like we're a burden. We don't want to seem like we're not being the men that we're supposed to be. And a lot of times we feel like we got it. It's our pride. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. I got it. If it gets too bad, don't worry about it. And it takes a lot when you're at that stage, when you're looking around and you realize that you don't have it anymore. And you lose sight, There's children out here, little kids who will never grow up to walk or on a beach or, go to a movie or anything, that will die to be where we are at. And sometimes we feel like we take our lives and we squander it. And what you did in the past is in the past. Whether it was good or it was bad, it was meant to happen because it got you where you're at. And for the fact that you yourself knew that there needed to be a change and you got that change, that is the most beautiful act that you can ever do. And fans, if you're listening, if you need help or assistance, this is the time to go and get that help. There's nothing wrong with it. Hell, you used to do it when you was a kid, when you needed help with homework, when you needed help with something that your friend knew something that you didn't know. When we get to a certain age, we feel like we can't ask for help no more. But it's always installed in us. There's nothing wrong with it, And you don't want to wait till that day when you got to go to that funeral, when you got to see him in that box, or you got to see him in that jar, and you got to see him not there anymore. Then you start asking, oh, I should have been there, or I could have helped, or, he could have called me, she could have called me. Why do we got to wait till we get to that level? I commend you so much. Whatever you found that got you there, continue it. Because that is the way that the world truly works. And whoever you touch, that make every second of you being sober that much more worth it. You know what I mean? And that's just coming from us and coming from the boy, because I know how it is to hit rock bottom. I know, when you walk around, you look around and you cry. You feel embarrassed. You feel like you're just not you anymore. You feel like you didn't do enough. And you're in self-pity. You're in self-denial. And sometimes it's hard to get out of it. It really is. But in order to know how strong you are, you got to fall. You got to fail. You got to have setbacks. You got to. Because that's the true truth of how strong you really are. So once again, thank you so much for sharing that. I hope that the fans heard it and listened. Yeah. And we thank you so much, Dan, for sharing that part of your life and showing us that there is a happy side. Because I've never heard the WWE in a long time helping people, but I have heard stories of them extending their hand. And I want to say to the WWE, thank you. If they have any more people out there, wrestlers, guys, performers, these guys have family. These guys they have children. They sons and daughters, brothers and aunts. That is the most beautiful thing, to know that you had that support system. It's truly amazing. Jack?
Thank you for that. And go ahead, Dan. You want to say something?
Yeah. Thank you for what you just said. That is so true, everything you said. It was really tough for me, because being an athlete and being, able to achieve a lot of the things that I've done in my life in the earlier years and stuff, it was really hard to ask for help. Or, when you go through a drug and alcohol rehab program, they give you things that you need to do and stuff. And I said, I'm Dan Spivey. I don't need to do it that way. I can do it this way. So I customized the programs, to fit what I wanted to do, And the hardest thing, especially for big guys, and, I was supposed to be one of the toughest guys in the world at one time. And, all these accolades and all this, bullshit. But, it's hard for a big, tough guy to ask for help. I think it's hard for anybody to, hey, man, I need help. I can't do this alone. And, the program that I believe in to get sober, what got me sober, it's a week program. And, it's a bunch of alcoholics and drug addicts helping each other. That's what makes it work. One alcoholic extending a hand and helping them and showing them how we did it. I can't get anybody sober. I can't get anybody, off drugs. I can't get anybody to quit drinking. But I can show them what I did, to get there, to find sobriety and to have a happy productive life. And it's, you just got to be willing, and you got to put out your hand and say, man, help, and that's what I did. I had to go outside the box, and just, say, I can't do this alone. And, there's people out there just wanting to help any, I'm just, especially the boys, all they have to do is just ask, and I'll do whatever I can to help.
Yeah,
or anybody. You just don't have to be one of the wrestlers. I mean, that's what I do.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that with you, and thank you for, killing your pride and being man enough to realize that you had to ask for help. Because a lot of people are struggling with, with addictions, and we've been to a lot of shows backstage with the boys, some known and famous on TV, some local indie guys that use drugs or you smoke weed or use pills, and they're hurting, and they need help. So hopefully they can hear your story and realize, hey, if Dan Spivey was able to ask for help and get clean, then I can do it too. I'm gonna bring in earlier guest Chris. He had a story too about similar to you about a drug addiction that he had. I'm gonna bring him in. 1 second. Okay, Chris, you there?
What up?
Chris, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're on live with Dan Spivey. I know you said you had a story about your issues with Xanax as well.
Well, I don't know. I felt like the conversation was getting a little somber, so I figured I'd call up with a funny story about when I was addicted to Xanax. I mean, I don't really consider myself addicted, but yeah, I was totally addicted to Xanax for a while. All right, so back when I was heavily using drugs, when I was like 18, 19 years old, I was down in Greenwood, and I know this guy, Dangerous, was, he said he lived in Florida, so he might know what I'm talking about, but I was out there and I was picking up, I think it was like a quarter pound of weed, and we were getting it to sell off. And I'm out there, and everybody's like, real tough and gangster out there, and I'm like the white guy in the hood. We're all like smoking a blunt, and I'm like fucked up on Xanax. And I get a call on my phone, and it's my girlfriend, and her mother are like crying their eyes out, and telling me, oh my God, you need to come back. I don't know. It was really, I couldn't even understand what they were saying. So I'm freaking looking at this guy. I'm not going to say his name. And I'm like, look, dude, I got to go. I don't know what's going on, but something really fucked up happened. So I drive back, and I see my ex and her mother sitting in their van maybe like 150 yards away from their house. And they're like, oh, my God, the cat, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, all right. So I start walking up towards the house. And I get to the house, and I'll just start laughing my face off. Like, they were all crying, and they thought I was crying, but I was laughing. So I walk up on the house, and I look at the garage door, and half of their cat was sticking out of the top of the garage. I guess it had climbed on top of the van, and when her mother shut the garage, like, the cat just couldn't make it out of there. I guess, they're not always as nimble as they seem. The cat got caught halfway between the top of the garage and the garage door. Well, I go back to the car and I get the garage door opener, and I go back to the house and I open the garage door up, and the cat just hits the ground like a ton of bricks. So I'm looking at it, and it looked like it took a breath, and I'm on the phone with them. I'm like, oh my God, I think the cat is alive. So her and her mother come running up. And I had a shovel with me just in case I had to bury the thing. And I poked it. Oh, my God, this thing was stiff as a board. I'm like, oh, well, I guess it's dead. So her and her mother are all distraught. I ended up having to bury this dead cat. But, yeah, Xanax is a hell of a drug, man. Don't do Xanax, kids.
Well, with that, Dan, do you have any response to that with using Xanax? Have you had any similar stories of the way it affected you? Thank you, WC, for calling in.
No, all I can say about Xanax is it almost killed me, all drugs will eventually, long, years and years and years ago, I mean, it was fun. I mean, I wouldn't have done it, but but then, after a while, it's going to cause you a lot of problems, a lot of heartache.
Yeah. AWC for doing. I know he didn't mention to me off air that he was addicted to it at one point and he got off. So, gonna bring in area code 281. We just saw buddy Nick from Houston, Texas.
Sure.
Yes. Thanks a lot. Thanks again for taking my call. Thank you, Dan. Just wanted to say, God bless you for being an inspiration. So many people that have or are still going through similar issues. And, there's just been so many stories about addiction and people, literally getting out of themselves, not knowing who they are anymore. So what you've been through and everything that you've had to endure, coming out on a positive note, you really need to be commended. And thanks again for sharing your story with the world.
Thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it. It's I didn't do this by myself. I had my faith in God had a lot to do with it. And I'm not really going to get into religion. And if anybody who wants to get into a program, a 12-step program or whatever, if you're afraid about the God thing, it's a higher power, whatever you want to believe in, as long as the higher power is not you, it's good, so you got to believe in something, I believe, and
definitely,
mine just happens to be God, so.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And then, big fan of yours since the early 80s, just wanted to know any fond memories of working in Japan?
I had a blast in Japan. I love working over there. If you look me up on Facebook, Dan Spivey on Facebook, I have a web page and I put a lot of stories and stuff that happened, in Japan. Nothing really currently that went on in Japan. I put the story about everybody asked about me and Adrian Bona's fight, so that I just posted that the other day. So if you want to keep that, it's on. Japan was a great place. I wish if I had my career to do over again, I would have stayed in Japan the whole time. I just should have stayed there. Giant Baba treated me really well, and I did really well in Japan. I enjoyed the Japanese people, the traditions, and it's a great culture.
So, great. Thank you so much, Dan, and thank you, folks, for taking my call. And definitely going to be listening in.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, man.
Thanks.
Great caller, man. I like that.
Hey, thank you, Nick from Texas. We'll bring in now.
I'll be there next year. See you next year, man.
Yeah, WrestleMania. Area code T40. Welcome to Under the Mat Radio with Dan Spivey.
My question for Dan is, how did you prepare yourself for the Waylon Mercy character that was so much different than your U.S. Express gimmick? Did you watch a lot of Cape Fear, or were you more into getting coaching from Vince McMahon?
I must have watched Cape Fear 100 times. It was the first time that I got to be somebody different. Everything that I've done up to that point, I was Dan Spivey. Just myself, and I got the chance to be Waylon Mercy, and I really enjoyed doing it. It was pretty easy for me to do. I grew up in the South, and I just thought of different people that I knew in the South and the talk, and I always watched promos of people. That's what fascinated me to professional wrestling, was trash talking and listening to Dusty and Superstar Billy Graham and Thunderbolt Patterson. I just loved the trash talking. And I came up with the idea of just, kind of making it low tone, speaking real soft kind of and slow. And, if you yell and scream, it kind of makes people mad at you. The Waylon Mercy vignettes that we did was just, I winged it. As soon as the red light came on, I just started talking about people that I knew back in the day growing up.
Did they ever make you edit your promos because they didn't like what you were saying, or did it pretty much get through the first time?
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you're saying.
Say that again, Cheeky. Not sure. I think we lost Cheeky. Sorry, Cheeky's call lost. Cheeky, you there?
Yeah.
Okay. What was your question?
Yeah, my question was if they ever had to edit the vignettes, because it seemed like you pretty much made up your own type premise for that. Did they pretty much agree with the way you were portraying that character?
No, they went with every one of them. They never did, cut me off or anything. They liked them, especially when I killed the bug. I thought they might say something about that, but that was no big deal. Vince loved the character, and he loved my vignettes. He loved how I closed it. Lives are going to be in Waylon Mercy's hands. You know what I mean? You'd be back there in the back, and everybody be walking around, saying, you know what I mean? It's driving you crazy, just ribbing you about, the vignettes and what I was saying.
Okay. Well, Cheeky, thanks for calling in, buddy.
Okay, thank
you for calling in. Gonna bring in Dan before we get back to your real quick story. Saltine, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, you can go. You got a question for Dan Spivey?
Yes, Mr. Spivey, how you doing, sir?
Good,
my question for you is on the Superstar tape, because this has been going around for years. Did you get injured on that match with Diesel? Because everybody's been talking about that for years.
Yeah, everybody. That's not true. I didn't get hurt in that match. I just quit. I wasn't making any money at the time, and they weren't using me the way that I was supposed to be used. And we had a pay-per-view in Montreal. They didn't use me on that, and I got up the next morning. We had a TV the next day somewhere in Canada, and I stayed right across from the Montreal airport. I knew it was like 85 and sunny in Tampa, Florida, and it was snow on the ground in Montreal, and so I just took a cab over to the airport, got on the plane, and flew back home to sunny Florida. And next day, Vince called me, and him and Jerry Briscoe called me and asked me, wanted me to come back. They had made all these promises, but I was hurt. My knees and my hips were hurting. I was on the pills real bad. I wasn't real happy with some of my performances. I wasn't making money, and I just decided to quit. 2 weeks later, I had my knee replaced. 6 months later, I had my hip replaced, and I just had enough. It was probably a bad decision on my part, maybe the worst one ever. I should have went back and gave it a try again. I probably would have got the push that I thought I deserved, but we'll never know now.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Saltine. We're going to bring in our correspondent, Shin-Blade. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was reading through the papers that you had sent me, and we went through the lawsuit pretty quick, though, but I remember that you were talking about Dynamite Kid. And can you name us some people, if you know to your knowledge, who are also involved in this lawsuit besides Billy Jack Haynes, not to call anybody out, or people who've been called to do the lawsuit, people who've been called to do the lawsuit, they rejected?
The only one that's giving me trouble about it is Blackjack Mulligan and another guy named Brian Clark. They've chimed in with Billy, calling me a stooge and various other names and stuff. So I've heard the Coco Beware. I've heard, let's see. I don't know. That's about all the people I know of. I think Kamala's family is involved, and Matt Bourne's family is involved, which is, I'm not telling any secrets. It's been on Facebook and in the papers. That's it. That's all I know of.
Thank you. I have to say that also we never mentioned this, but you also have a Facebook page dedicated to people who want to get over addiction. And right now, if you don't mind me plugging it, I will tell people that in the Florida area, there's a place called Sober Choice. That if you ever need help, or if you need counseling or anything of that nature, you can go to Sober Choice Rehab, which is in Odessa, Florida.
Yeah, it's SoberChoice.com is the webpage. I don't have any problems with the webpage, but if you go on there, it should be working now. But the number is 813-713-9216. The number again is 813-713-9216. SoberChoice.com.
Okay. Well, I have to say, with also checking myself, we have read these papers, and honestly, you have came in clear as a bell, with this whole manifesto that's been written and put out there, and honestly, Jack Haynes has been very, very delusional. He's been calling people out, and I know that in my heart, one of the guys that is one of my favorite wrestlers in the past was Dynamite Kid, and I know he would never go on a lawsuit like that because of his insurance policies in England. He can barely say a sentence.
That's very true, and Dynamite isn't the type of guy to be one to hand out and get something for nothing. He wouldn't do it. I mean, I ran with Dynamite when we were both working for Vince, and we roomed together. We traveled the roads. He stayed at my house during vacations and stuff. I mean, he wouldn't do something like that. And, it would mess him up with what all he's got going on, over there in Europe. I mean, his brother told me that Dynamite knew nothing of this thing. Billy is, he's belittled me. He's said all kind of crap about him and Brian Clark and Blackjack, and I haven't said anything, derogatory, about any of those guys. I've taken the high road on all this, and everything that they have stated, I've done the research, I've looked it up, and, I have told the truth, what I found to be written and what I found to be in social media to be the truth. And they haven't been able to, contradict anything that I've said, but them on the other hand, just about everything they say, I can find it wrong somewhere,
Well, also I have read here in the final pages of these sheets that you have here that you gave me, and it makes me sick to no end that even Billy Jack Haynes had called out Roddy Piper, and he made this stunning inaccuracy to saying that Stone Cold Steve Austin got Roddy Piper fired off of PodcastOne. He cried to Vince McMahon to get Roddy Piper off of PodcastOne, and the cause of death to Roddy Piper was Vince McMahon, which is untrue.
Wow.
Because Roddy Piper had an on and off relationship with WWE. Now, I don't know what happened, and this is from a guy who was working in WWE for only 2 years. So
only 2.
Why sue Vince McMahon when you worked 2 years? I mean, I can understand personally The Undertaker, who has worked for 25 plus years for WWE, but he is very financially stable. So why would a man like that would be working for 2 years? He passed out on a plane, so he blacked out on plane. Vince McMahon let him go, and then he begged. He infamously, a lot of guys said this, he drove all the way from Portland, Oregon to Tampa, Florida to beg Hulk Hogan to get his job back. I mean, I do not get it.
Yeah, heard that.
I think he did that. I mean, that was after he badmouthed on some television show, badmouthed Vince and Hulk, on some television show. And then he drives from Portland in his car all the way down to the Bayfront Center in Tampa and begged Hogan to talk to Vince to get him rehired again. And Terry wanted nothing to do with the guy, and I've had that report from several of my friends that were there and witnessed it. He's all this stuff about, him saying that Vince killed Rowdy. It's the biggest bunch of crap I've ever heard in my life. First of all, Vince doesn't own PodcastOne. I looked it up and I found that Vince doesn't own PodcastOne. It was, Stone Cold did go to the owner of PodcastOne and said, asked him to remove that segment that Roddy did because it had some impersonator that was doing Steve. Steve was okay with it, but they got into some personal stuff about some domestic violence, and Steve didn't want it on there. So he talked to the owner, and the guy took that segment off. Well, Roddy and the president had a talk, and Roddy decided that he wanted to do some other things. He didn't want to use PodcastOne anymore. So Roddy walked away from it.
Okay.
And so that's what happened. I mean, Vince had nothing to do with it. Well, then he said, Stone Cold went to Vince and took away his Legend contract. 2 weeks ago, I saw Hunter.
That's not true.
We were doing a TV show, doing Raw here, and I talked to Hunter about all this, which Hunter didn't know anything. I told him about the Legend. He said anything like that would go through me, and trust me, Dan, that never ever happened. Roddy still has a Legends contract. So all that stuff, he said that Vince, Vince fired Roddy, and 3 days later, Roddy had a heart attack because of stress. Trust me, Roddy Piper has had a lot more stress than someone firing him. That did happen. I mean, the guy just beat cancer in 2009. He's been through all kinds of stuff. So, it's just Billy Jack just wanting to get some notoriety by coming out with these outrageous, stuff. I think he's high on crystal meth. He's smoking a pipe or doing something because, he just talks crazy stuff. He also wants to challenge me and Stone Cold, to a boxing match. He says, we'll use UFC rules and stuff, but we want 1 minute rounds and 1 minute rest periods and all that. That sounds like a boxing match. It doesn't sound like the UFC rules. I mean, no takedowns and the guy, first of all, that would never ever happen. He wants to put up $1 million. Well, I don't have $1 million. Stone Cold might, but I don't. I mean, I know Billy doesn't have $1 million. I could probably get Vince to back me, but who's going to back Billy? I mean, he can't even pass a physical. I mean, the guy has, stated by him, he has hepatitis C. I don't think he could pass a drug test. He just couldn't pass a physical. And he wants to fight somebody like me or Stone Cold, and he's got all these head injuries. He's supposed to have concussions. He's supposed to have dementia. If he doesn't have dementia, he would have dementia later if he got in the ring with me, or Stone Cold. I mean, the guy just talks crazy stuff. And if you ever seen his shoot interview that he does talking about Benoit and his family and stuff, and the guy says he's a reborn Christian and he's a sober recovering drug addict, they don't say the F-bomb every other word and talk. I mean, that should be taken off the air because it's just ugly, and to talk the way that he does about some people that have died and they're supposed to be his friends. I mean, it's bad stuff, man. It's sick.
Yeah, it is. And I was just about to mention that too about how he was on that time about Vince is the reason why Benoit killed Vince killed Benoit and all this other mess and spaceships.
You guys see the one that he did that had this wig on challenging Stone Cold to that fight? He did this thing on a blonde wig or something, and he just was ranting and raving about fighting Stone Cold and calling him a wife beater and all this stuff. I mean, he's out of his mind. He's absolutely nuts.
Just say, well, that being said, DD, Dan Spivey, thank you for coming on, man. I know you're a busy person. Thank you for coming to us to be on this show. Definitely was an honor for us.
Yeah, you guys do a great job. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know. Thank you for that. Hopefully we can have you back on scene. We can go over more about your illustrious career and talk even more about, about your program and what you're doing to help out more of the boys.
Well, everybody can get a hold of me, on Facebook, Dan Spivey. Check me out. I have a Facebook page that we try to put stories out to people. I'm in the process of writing a book. My wife has a book out right now. It's called I Believe in Me. It's inspiration and quotes for kids. We're going to be putting that out on Facebook real soon for sale, and it's in the bookstores. And my phone number again for Sober Choice is area code 813-713-9216.
Yeah, please check it out. Please check it out. Sober Choice.
Please.
Dan, it's been an honor. Definitely has been. We look forward to having you back on again, and thank you much for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, DD, man. We're going to holler back at you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.